Hey guys, it's Will. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. If you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for finding us. I hope you dig this video. Today we are talking about how an absolutely classic film, a masterpiece of world cinema, I think most people would agree, potentially saved a Japanese studio. And when I say saved a Japanese studio, I don't mean it like financially saved it. I mean it literally saved it from being destroyed. I really like this story. It's a very brief story, but I put together some cool images I thought I would show to kind of contextualize it. And we could talk about a movie that I absolutely love. The movie is Rashomon, released in 1950. It was directed by Akira Kurosawa, who for me is one of the great filmmakers of all time. He's definitely on my Mount Rushmore of filmmaking. Maybe someday I will tell the story of how Kurosawa is essentially responsible for me going to film school, which is responsible for me starting this channel. So we owe it all to Kurosawa. I used to have a Tumblr called the Kurosawa Project .tumblr.whatever.com, and I would put like rare photos from behind the scenes of Kurosawa films on there and tell stories about behind the scenes from Kurosawa, because I've read a lot of books about Kurosawa and stuff like this. I'm a huge fan. And so, I mean, just to give you a little bit of background on Rashomon, like I said, it was released in 1950. It's directed by Kurosawa. It was written by Kurosawa and Shinobu Hashimoto. Shinobu Hashimoto, I think, is indisputably one of the greatest screenwriters of all time. He worked on so many classic films with Kurosawa, but also in collaboration with other great filmmakers. The film stars Toshiro Mifune, Takashi Shimura is in it, who for me is like on the short list of the greatest actors of all time. You'll know him if you've seen a lot of Kurosawa movies because he was in like 16 or 17 of them. He's in like Ikiru, he's in Seven Samurai, films like that. Machiko Kyo, Masayuki Mori are also in this film. It's just a great classic movie. So let's jump into some images, and then I'll tell you kind of a little story here. So I made myself kind of small so you can see the pictures better, because it's more interesting to look at the pictures than it is to look at me. This is a book called Something Like an Autobiography that is written by Kurosawa. I have a copy of it right here, but this is like a library copy, so it's just like a generic hardcover. Like, it's not particularly interesting to look at. I really like the cover art on this. This is like the standard English language edition of this book. So it's a relatively short book, and it only goes up until about Rashomon. The last chapter is on Rashomon, but he does talk a little bit about The Idiot, which is the film that he made after Rashomon, which is a Dostoevsky adaptation. I think it came out in 1951. That's a whole other can of worms. But suffice it to say, the little snippet here I'm going to read you is taken from this book. So if you're interested in reading about Kurosawa in his own words, albeit only really about the beginning of his career and his early life and stuff like this, that's the book for you. So the thing that you need to know about Rashomon before we get into the video and the story and stuff like that is that there's a framing device within the film. So a framing device is this kind of thing where you return to a timeline or a scene again and again and again throughout a narrative, and it frames kind of the movie, right? So there's this framing device in Rashomon where you have the Minoru Chiaki. Minoru Chiaki, by the way, is a freaking incredible actor too, and is in tons of Kurosawa is most heavily associated with his partnerships with Mifune, who is, obviously he's in Yojimbo, and he's in Seven Samurai, and he's in Throne of Blood, and he's in like all these freaking incredible movies with Kurosawa. And then not with Kurosawa, he was in a lot of other really incredible movies, and he's like one of the great kind of film stars of all time. But Kurosawa had like a troupe of actors who he worked with regularly who were really incredible actors, and Minoru Chiaki is one of them. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, Takashi Shimura was the actor who was in the most number of Kurosawa films, and then Mifune, and then I believe Minoru Chiaki is third on that list. But the framing device is that Minoru Chiaki is sitting under this massive gate that has been ruined. It's kind of like crushed and destroyed, and you'll see pictures of it in a second here that I'll show you. And he's talking to this guy telling a story, and the stories that they're telling are what we end up finding out is the narrative of the film, right? So the story is kind of told in flashback through a narrator, right? So it's a really interesting movie because the movie is about how everyone has a different perspective on the same event. So there is no real truth, but all of that is being told to us by yet another person. So there's so many perspectives on it. It gets so kind of fragmented. It's really interesting. But anyway, that being neither here nor there, Minoru Chiaki is sitting under this gate, and it's pouring rain, right? That's what kind of sets up the story that I'm going to tell you here. So here is a screenshot from the movie. And as you can see, that's the gate. So as I said, it's this massive gate, but it's kind of like falling apart, right? It is like pouring rain. Here's another shot from that, right? So you can see all the rain splashing off of the steps here that are leading up to the gate. So the story here is that Kurosawa tried traditional rain machines that they would use in a movie to make rain like this, and they weren't working for him. So if you know Kurosawa well, if you've seen a lot of his films, weather is very, very important to him. So he'll have like crazy wind or like these crazy violent rainstorms, or like there's always weather in his movies, and the weather often evokes the kind of the mood of the characters, the tone of the film, right? So he really wanted to get this rain right. Actually, a famous story is that Redbeard, I'm sorry I'm going on so many tangents, but I love Kurosawa. I love talking about this stuff. Redbeard is a Kurosawa film from 1965, which in Japan is considered to be like a great masterpiece by Kurosawa. It's not as well known outside of Japan, but it's a freaking fantastic film. It's available from Criterion Collection. Anyway, point being, they filmed Redbeard over the course of an entire year because Kurosawa wanted to get like actual snow and actual spring with the flowers blooming. Like, yeah. So he's really into weather and seasons and stuff like that. So the rain machines were not working for him. So what did they do? They brought in fire trucks. So you can, this is a shot from the production of the film. You can see in the middle of the frame there's fire hoses, and there's these guys in rain slickers like working with the fire hoses, setting up the fire hoses, and look at all the mud and the water from the rain. You can even see water pouring off of the roof of the gate in the background, right? Here's a much clearer photo. That I'm pretty sure that's Kurosawa with the bucket hat on, not the white bucket hat, but the black one. So you see the guy wearing the white shirt, the white bucket hat, and then to his left, there's a tall, Kurosawa was tall. He was like about 6 feet tall. So in photos, it's pretty easy to see who's him because he's usually taller than everyone around him. So I think that's him wearing the bucket hat. But that's a fire truck. You can see that little tanker looking thing, and they're spraying these hoses up in the air, and that's how they created the rain for this film. So now I want to read you something from Kurosawa's autobiography. And like literally it's 2 sentences. During the shooting, there were 2 fires at Daiei Studios. So this was filmed on the back lot of Daiei Studios. But because we had mobilized the fire engines for our filming, they were already primed and drilled, so the studios escaped with very minor damage. That's the whole story. But think about this for a second. If you know anything about movies, right, celluloid, which is what films were shot on when they were shot on actual film, is extremely flammable. You're on a film studio. You've probably got lots of celluloid around. You may have like negatives or prints for like classic Japanese films, right? This is all just conjecture, but this is what I'm thinking in my head of like romanticizing this story. But all the sets, the costumes for all these classic films, the countless hundreds of people who were probably working on the studio at the time, fires started and could have potentially destroyed the studio, destroyed classic Japanese movies by burning up the film stock, destroyed costumes, other things like that, could have killed or really hurt people. And they've got these fire trucks there for creating the rain for this scene, and it saves the studio in a way. And we don't know how severe the fires are because Kurosawa doesn't mention it, but it's just crazy to me to think about that. It's such an amazing coincidence. And here we have Rashomon, one of the great films of all time. Certainly when you're looking at like the kind of the art house film. Like this movie came out before Seventh Seal. Seventh Seal came out in 1955, if I'm not mistaken. That's a Bergman film, so it's a Swedish movie. And a lot of people talk about the Seventh Seal being like the film that created the notion in the United States, it should be said, of this kind of like international art house avant-garde film that was the antithesis of what was coming out of Hollywood, and like serious film goers going to see these films. Like I think even Woody Allen has talked about this before. But Kurosawa was huge among, you know, people like Coppola, Lucas, Spielberg. They would go see his movies in the theaters when they were at film school and stuff like that. But Rashomon predated the release of Seventh Seal, and it was released, I believe it was released in the West in 1951, and it won I think the Venice Film Festival, and because of that it was distributed, and so it was like this very early example of this very intellectual, philosophical, extremely well made film from another culture, from another language, playing on like the circuit in the United States, and like people being exposed to that in different types of filmmaking and different types of ideas, right? And throughout the 1950s that grew and grew and grew. until you get to, I mean, in 54 you had La Strada, right, Fellini, but then by the end of the 50s you've got La Dolce Vita, which is like a legitimate hit like around the world, and you get 8.5. These are both Fellini films, and then you're getting stuff like 400 Blows by Truffaut, which was hugely influential on Hollywood filmmakers who saw that and really wanted to make stuff with that similar kind of emotion and energy. And then you get Godard, and like, Tarkovsky comes on the heels of that, and this whole kind of scene starts blowing up. And this movie, 1950, when it came out in Japan in 1951, in I believe 51 in the US, is a very early, very interesting example of that. So I just wanted to show a couple more pictures because I'm such a geek about Rashomon and behind the scenes pictures and stuff. This is the building of the gate, right? So here's the gate in the background, and here we can see it in the actual film. This is them constructing it. So it starts as just this on this back lot at the studio, and then it becomes this, and then you can see it starting to take shape here. And then here it is more or less finished. I mean, you can see the scaffolding is still up, but they're like getting towards the end of the construction of it here. So I just wanted to show those pictures because I had them from having done that Kurosawa Tumblr account. And I thought people might dig it if they dig this video. So that's just me geeking out about Rashomon. That was basically the whole purpose of this movie, or this video rather, excuse me. But I thought it would be really fun to talk about that story and how the fires and how the fire trucks being there for Rashomon maybe potentially, I don't know, save the studio. So let me know in the comments what you think about this, or like what your favorite Kurosawa movies are, what your favorite Japanese movies are, what your favorite behind the scenes stories are. If you're interested in me doing other types of videos like this, please do let me know, because obviously this was really fun for me, like really excited and geeking out. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you appreciate this, and we'll see you next time.